Are you ready to dairy-free your mind? This summer, melt away your dairy-free expectations with So Delicious dairy-free frozen desserts. Enjoy mind-blowing flavors like salted caramel cluster, chocolate cookies and cream, cookie dough, and more. For over 35 years, So Delicious has been cranking up the flavor with show-stopping products that are 100% dairy-free, certified vegan by Vegan Action, and are so unbelievably creamy, your taste buds will do a double take. Dairy-free your mind. Visit SoDeliciousDairyFree.com.
Put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more.
Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Well, will President Trump be able to end the Russia-Ukraine war? And could that happen in a matter of weeks? That could happen after those historic meetings that President Trump had recently with Putin in Alaska and then Zelensky and European leaders at the White House. And joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He is a former Department of Defense intel officer and also president of Project Sentinel. Tony, it's so great to have you here.
Rita, always a pleasure to join you. Thank you for having me and letting me talk about all of this great good news. So thanks for having me.
Where is all of this headed? What do you think is going to happen in the next few days, next few weeks, next few months?
Well, if nothing else, I think it's fabulous that President Trump has brought back the Apprentice and turned it into the Apprentice, the European edition, with all the leaders in the office with him. Just saying, it was a kind of a throwback to the show. Just looking at all the folks there and them kind of talking about what they're doing to help out regarding the process. So I thought that was a really good optic. And think about just where we're at. No one else, Rita, could have pulled together all of these leaders literally at the last minute, got them together to focus on this. And I think it's just so important that he's team building as well as bringing peace. And so I just don't think Americans understand. I've talked to a couple of reporters, and you've probably talked to them too. No one has ever seen anything like this, where literally everybody in Europe dropped what they were doing and came to the White House to talk about this. So that's an excellent sign. Secondly, the fact that he's doing this, the way he's doing it is very Reagan-esque. And I've been comparing the meeting he had with Putin to the Reykjavik meeting that Reagan had with Gorbachev back in October of '86. And people didn't recognize that, that meeting didn't go anywhere directly, but what came after the meeting was what was important. And I think the same thing is playing out now. Nothing necessarily happened regarding decisions at the meeting with Putin, but right now President Trump is directing things and moving things in a very positive way that I think we'll see a second meeting probably next week with Putin and Zelensky. And I think he's driving this thing by power of will and his skill in negotiations to a very positive, I think, a very quick end to the war.
Do you believe it's going to be maybe even a matter of weeks? I mean, it seems like it is turbocharged.
I think Trump has decided this is a priority, and he's gotten the world to go along. So I think so. The big thing is keeping the pace up. Today, I heard a number of folks talking about, we can wait a few weeks. No, the Europeans were fine about waiting. No, don't wait. Don't let the moment pass to actually do the hard things of resolving differences, and that's what President Trump is doing. And if you leave it to Merz, the Germans, they were fine with the ceasefire. Trump said, no, we're going to end this. Ceasefires are not durable. We want a durable peace. And I think that's why he's working right now to get the next meeting probably lined up within the next 2 weeks.
You know, it's interesting. You brought up the fact that some of the European leaders did say, according to President Trump, one of them said, oh, well, maybe in a month or two, let's reconvene. Yeah. And he said, no, we can't.
No.
We're losing, like thousands of people a day. We cannot wait. How important is the fact that, like you said, he is laser focused and keeping that momentum, because you got to sort of strike while the irons are hot.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You finally got people's attention, Rita. I mean, one of the notable features about the last administration is that they were always phoning it in. They never really seemed to care. It was always about whatever the optic was, not the reality. Trump's the opposite. No. The reality is people are dying. We need to focus on that. Let's not worry about, having all the ruffles and flourishes and all the diplomatic protocol stuff. No. If you want to be involved, come here now. If you want to get this done, we need to talk about it now. And I think that's what's really significant about this. Otherwise, Rita, people are more than happy to kick the can down the road. The Europeans, frankly, want the U.S. to be involved, but they'd rather us be involved by paying money. They want us to be involved for reasons which are not necessarily focused on peace. They're more focused on profit. So that's why I think Trump is saying, no. A ceasefire would require us to continue to basically be in a state of war. We don't want that. We want it ended. We want to end it with commerce leading and diplomacy leading, and I think that's why he's pushing all these folks to keep the pace going.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab, LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Marshalls, where you never have to compromise between quality and price. The buyers at Marshalls hustle hard, working to bring you great deals on brand name and designer pieces. Because Marshalls believes everyone deserves access to the good stuff. Visit a Marshalls store near you or shop online at marshalls.com.
On top of building this fake volcano for months, I give my daughter Smarty Pants vitamins to support her brain health. So her science fair project sounds more like and less like. And while I may say it's not a competition, of course it's a f***ing competition. Choose Smarty Pants vitamins to support your kid's brain health and save the science fair. Shop on Amazon, smartypantsvitamins.com, or at Target today.
You know, you talked about, Tony, the optics at the White House. That apprentice is a great analogy because you see him there at the Resolute desk, there on the other side, there in the Oval Office. And it's almost like, here's the teacher, here are the students. And
Exactly.
it was an extraordinary moment and a historic moment. I mean, you and I have both been at the White House a lot. And you just think about how to see that many people coming in, my jaw dropped as I was watching each one kind of entering, and then Zelensky coming in, and again, it comes on the heels of Trump. Explain just how big of a deal that moment was, that meeting was at the White House. It truly was a remarkable, monumental moment.
Well, first off, the attitude was significantly different. Let's remember the first meeting with President Zelensky was not a good one.
Right.
And the attitude was, we owed it to him and the Ukrainians to help. And it's like, no, we're helping you because it's the right thing to do. Don't make demands on us and be rude. And I think that was the notable feature of that. It was very rude. President Zelensky's taken a step back. I think he even dressed for the occasion. President Trump kind of made comments about his attire, which is good. But it's a completely different attitude. It's one that, hey, we want to actually work with you now to end this. And I think that is going a long way to help set the stage for the resolution. Now, I'm going to be blunt with you and your audience here. Look, there's some issues here that are not going to go over well. And those have to do with territory. I think the 4 Russian provinces are not coming back to Ukraine anytime soon. I'm not saying they're never coming back. I'm saying they're not coming back now. And secondly, what exactly do security, quote unquote, security guarantees look like? You and I both know that the MAGA folks are very much against over engagement of U.S. forces. Obviously, that's something that's going to have to be addressed. And I think that's those 2 areas. What exactly happens to the land and what is exactly included in a security guarantee? Those are the things that President Zelensky and President Trump are going to have to agree to before they go back and talk to Putin.
Yeah, it seems those are clearly, I agree with you, the sticking points. Now, first off, on the controlled territories, Putin has made some strides, obviously, but not a lot in the last 2.5, 3 years, or 3.5 years, I should say, since it's been going on in those areas. And right. And the reason, and you know this better than anybody, Tony, that the reason also part of that area is appealing, obviously it's mineral rich, obviously it's part of Ukraine. But the other thing is that beyond that is really flat farmland. And a lot of people have brought this up this week where they essentially said that if he goes if he gets a foothold there, or even can get a little further in, it's almost clear sailing to Kharkiv and then Kyiv and some others from a military standpoint. That's why Zelensky is saying we certainly need guarantees, not just for that, but for other reasons. But there's a real terrain question too. Can you kind of explain the sort of the logistics of strategic wise why Putin wants it? Obviously beyond even just wanting territory.
Yeah. So the territory from the current engagement areas to the Dnieper River pretty much is open plains. It's the breadbasket of Europe, really. They produce a lot of grain. And it's flat terrain. For those who study World War II, man, oh man, you had a lot of tank battles over that space. And that's the thing. The Russians know how to move fast if they so choose. And I think that's why right now there's an engagement going on in those areas, and they're trying their best to stop the Russians from advancing. But to your point, should the strongholds the Ukrainians currently hold fall, that's it. There's nothing really left to stop the Russians from going all the way easily to the Dnieper, and at least creating a situation where there would be a partition of Ukraine into 2 halves. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of. With that said, within the current engagement, the Ukrainians have been very much able to use new technology to create conditions for the Russians to really suffer. And I don't say this because I know President Trump does not like the dying on both sides, but they have the Ukrainians have imposed a great cost on the Russians for every meter of land they've got. So this has not been something easy for them. And I think that's why it's so important to understand that the resources we did give the Ukrainians were used up until now. But again, there's no guarantee that we can continue to do that by the fact that I think the Ukrainians are having a hard time manning their military. They're having to resort to bring in senior, people my age in the 60s and people younger than 20. So it's a very difficult manpower equation for the Ukrainians to continue at the current pace.
Yeah, I was hearing that they were drafting, 60-year-olds like you talked about, a whole bunch of people. The other question is, as you look at the will, even the American public, I mean, they would like to see Ukraine win, but they also are getting war weary. And even in Ukraine, there were some polls I saw recently, Tony Shaffer, where they said that they would like to see, obviously, an end to it. that they'd like to find. Obviously, they want an end that they believe is fair, but they want to see an end to it. So 3.5 years is a long time. And there are estimates that there have been 1 million people on both sides, 2 million maybe potentially total, that we don't even know really the full number because there's just so many losses.
Right. And that's tragic. And it's going to take years to account for everybody who's been lost. And it's really sad. But within the context of the conflict, though, we need to actually understand that, again, let me be very clear on this. Just because you don't get the provinces back now doesn't mean they're not coming back. This is one of those things which we have to understand that some of these things take time. And I've referenced the meeting between Gorbachev and Reagan. Rita, whoever thought at that point in time that West Germany and East Germany would be back together, right? I mean, things change based on contact. And the fact that we have a dialogue with Putin, that we're moving in a direction that allows for some level of peaceful, discussion of how do we get to peace, it tells me that there's ways to resolve this that don't require continuous and indefinite military actions on the battlefield.
What about Putin? That meeting, first of all, I give President Trump, like you do, a lot of credit for arranging the meeting and meeting with Putin, because Biden couldn't even get him on the phone and didn't seem to care to. And so here he meets with him. Describe sort of the mindset of Putin. I mean, he's a former KGB guy. Can we trust anything from Putin? History has shown us no.
So you might laugh at me, but when I was in high school, I read a book called The Russians by Frederick Smith. It's a big old thick book. It's about 2 inches thick. That's how geeky I am. Anyway, and the one lesson I learned in high school, which I do remember to this day, is what the Russians believe: what's yours is what's ours is ours, and what's yours is negotiable. And that's their attitude. That goes back to the Tsar. So nothing has changed. And of course, the trust but verify mantra by the Reagan folks, and I'm friends and mentored by the Reagan folks who are still alive. So I take that to heart every time I see any Russian leader doing anything. And I think President Trump understands that. Putin's a thug. Putin's a former KGB guy who got hired by Boris Yeltsin to be his heavy guy, to be the muscle. And so when you come up that way, Rita, you can take the thug out of Petersburg, but you can't take the Petersburg out of the thug. I mean, he's still going to be operating like it's a mafia, in Petersburg. So that's what he is. And as long as you understand that, you can deal with him in terms, I think, that he will respond to, and he responds to strength, and that's very clear of how this has all gone.
It's interesting you bring up the strength, because how different is it now with President Trump, clearly, than a Biden who, a lot of people didn't seem to respect on the world stage. And yet here you have President Trump who said, you know what? No, Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapons. He goes in and does the strikes there on the nuclear facilities. So he knows Trump is a guy who doesn't want to have to use the heavy metal, but will use it if he needs to. And maybe he's, met a bit of his match, Putin, if you will, now.
So the two things that I think will help illustrate the point, first off, I think we would all agree, Rita, that the two greatest nuclear superpowers on the planet, they should probably be talking to each other. It's probably a good idea.
Yep.
Because during the Cold War, miscalculation almost resulted in at least 6 nuclear exchanges. And there's a number that they're very well documented. Some have not been documented, but there were several times, Rita, during the Cold War, due to mistrust, we almost had nuclear exchanges. And those things would have ended civilization as far as I'm concerned. So that's the first thing we're talking. Secondly, Putin himself has said, if President Trump was in power back in when the war started, well, it never started. And I think the fact that Joe Biden even said, well, we would accept an incursion, open that door. I mean, come on. What leader of the free world says to the Russians, yeah, go ahead and do an incursion, and thinks they won't do it? And that's what happened. So I think that Trump exudes strength, and also he exudes the political will to do things. I always tell this story about the Russians and Reagan. Reagan did one event, Rita, that historians later came to find was the thing that cemented within the Russian leadership mind that Reagan was a serious man and a man who was willing to do hard things. Do you recall off the top of your head what that event was that they measured him by?
Go ahead, tell me.
When he fired the air traffic controllers.
That's right. That was a huge move.
So when that what seemed to be to us like an annoyance, like a lot of people on the left were upset, that in the mind of the Soviet leaders said, "Oh my God, this guy is serious. He's willing to do hard things that no one else is willing to do." That itself created the perception that Reagan would do whatever was necessary. Same thing with Putin. Trump has done that within his mind, that by striking Iran, by assassinating Soleimani and other leaders, Putin knows that Trump says something, he's going to do it. It's that strength through action that really has been that which cemented, I believe, the relationship for Trump to be essentially able to play an effective game of cards with Putin.
Love espresso, drip coffee, and cold brew? With the Ninja Luxe Cafe, if you can crave it, you can brew it. Espresso, balanced. Drip coffee, rich. Cold brew in a flash. With Barista Assist technology, you brew with no stress and no guesswork and make perfect silky microfoam hands-free from dairy or plant-based milks. Shop the Ninja Luxe Cafe at ninjakitchen.com.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 40% off site-wide, plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Now, before I leave you here, Tony, I want to ask you about the U.S. side. We talked about Putin. I want to hear about the security guarantees because President Trump came out and said no U.S. boots on the ground. He didn't sort of rule out maybe some sort of air support or something, some sort of Article 5, not obviously NATO, because Putin doesn't want it. And Trump's been clear that, Ukraine's not going to have that. But they might have Article 5-like security protections. What role could the U.S. play?
Well, we would be the coordinator and guarantor. We'd be the 911 force. And I have actually been saying this is a lot like the Cold War. Remember, we had an East Warsaw Pact, Belarus and Russia are kind of like that right now, and whatever they continue to have of Ukraine, that'll be what they have. And then, of course, we have the largest NATO base being built right now in Romania. We actually have 2 armor brigades in Poland. The U.S. does. So we have the conditions to be prepared to be the 911 force without having to be in Ukraine. So I think that's what we're going to be looking at is how do we set up deterrence, effective deterrence, credible deterrence that will actually ensure that Putin and the Russians don't dare do what they did back 3 years ago. So I think that's what the plan, I don't know. If I were the guy in charge, that's what I would be doing. And I think Pete Hegseth right now is probably dusting off some of the old NATO plans from the Cold War and figuring out how we may be able to take some lessons from that, put it into a security guarantee set that would be presented to the Europeans as a potential solution to that issue.
And how complex is putting all that together, or do you believe because we're already there, it's pretty easy, right?
Well, yes and no. One of the things that President Trump is demanding, and I think we should follow through, is that the Europeans have to start paying their fair share. Since the Cold War, there's been a drop-off of how much they pay. They've kind of depended on us to be the ones paying for everything, Rita, which both in the first term and this term, President Trump has said, we're not going to accept that. So that's going to change. And then secondly, getting the Europeans back in a mindset of being prepared to go to war is not an easy thing. They are not prepared to go to war. They talk a big game, but they're not ready. Right now, the Mississippi National Guard is bigger than the British military. Think about that. Each European nation has been diminished to the point of irrelevance regarding military stature. They don't exist as an effective military force. That's got to change if you're going to have credible deterrence. So the complexity comes in rebuilding and establishing a path of contingency operations that would effectively allow for NATO to fight as NATO. We're not there. It would take some time to get there.
But you believe we could?
With Trump's leadership? No doubt. Absolutely.
Wow. Well, this is really monumental. We are watching history, like you talked about. It may be a Reykjavik Part 2 that we've just experienced, and it could be equally transformative. Really extraordinary. Yeah. And everybody, by the way, be sure to subscribe and share to this incredible podcast. It was so interesting, and we always learn so much from you, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure, Rita. And Jim, check me out on X. Be sure and follow me there, too, so we can continue to have interesting conversations.
Absolutely. Tony always has the best stuff. Make sure that you check it out, everybody. Tony, thank you.
Thanks, Rita.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.